Welcome back to the Pirate Therapist. Today, I want to talk to you about something I think most of us are feeling, whether we've said it out loud or not. The world can feel somewhat relentless and heavy. Every day, there's more noise, more outrage. Well, I live in northern Utah right now, and there's a lot of outrage about the local government trying to sneak past the people, the world's largest data center. People are outraged that the politicians are voting for this and trying to rush it past rather than get any say from the people that they're supposedly representing. There's more grief in the world. The older I get, the more I see my peers starting to die, to pass away. I still feel like I'm too young to have this happen, but it seems like every year I hear more and more about someone I know who's passed away. We all have examples of grief in our lives, and it's normal. It's a part of life, and we can't really expect to have it go away. But we will get time between those periods of grief that we can hang on to, and we should hang on to those. We also will have events come and go that can be more positive in our lives, but we have more conflict. Right now, the world is seeing so much conflict. We have the situation in Iran going on, and whether you agree with it or not, it's here. We seem to have a lot of animosity around whoever is president, what they're doing and why they're awful or why they're great and why the other side is wrong. We have more fear. When we have so much tension in the world, in our lives, we're bound to have increased fears and anxiety. We have less faith in the positive outcomes or even the positive potential in our lives. More reasons to feel tired before the day has even properly begun. And the odd thing is, a lot of us have adapted to that heaviness so completely that we barely question it anymore. We wake up and reach for that phone. We start absorbing headlines and scroll through all that frustration and tragedy, all the arguments, and the anxiety that it causes. And then we try and move through the rest of our day as though our minds and our bodies are not affected by any of it. But of course, we're affected by it. How could we not be? We are human beings. We have hopes and fears and concerns that are exacerbated by the constant feed of stress and anxiety. We are permeable. All the stuff that we take in becomes part of our days and our thoughts, and we're shaped by what we live around, by what we repeatedly consume, and by what we allow to take our constant attention. And if we're not careful, that negativity becomes something that we encounter and starts becoming the atmosphere we live in internally. It starts changing the tone of our thoughts and the quality of our hopes, the depth of our patience, and the way we speak to people. It affects the way we carry ourselves. And what's even a little more scary is the way that we imagine the future. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Not because I think we should ignore reality, and I don't believe in pretending that everything is fine. And I certainly not because I think the answer is shallow positivity or smiling our way past pain. This episode is not about denial. It's about creating a counterbalance to the negativity. It's about learning how to live in a world that is often painful and divided, that can be so loud that it's exhausting. Learning how to live in these things without letting these things become the only forces shaping our inner thoughts and our life. Because if all we feed ourselves is anger, fear, and cynicism, this emotional noise, it eventually, we begin to speak that language fluently. We start to lose access to wonder, to peace. We become quick to assume the worst. We grow emotionally brittle. We stop noticing beauty, not because it's gone, but because our attention has been trained to look elsewhere. And that has a cost. It has a cost in our relationships. It weighs heavy and harms our relationships. It has a cost in our creativity. It has a cost in our sleep. We have a much harder time sleeping when we're constantly stressed. It has a cost in our spiritual lives. We lose faith in all the different aspects that should build us up. It has a cost in our ability to remain tender in a world that keeps rewarding hardness. So today, I want to talk or I want to make a case for something a little more critical, making a making time to counterbalance the darkness, not erase it. I can't. We can't. Not to minimize it, but to keep it from becoming a total takeover of our minds by negativity and having that be the only experience that we can see, that we can have, because there is still goodness in this world. There is still beauty. There is still music, kindness, friendship, laughter, decency, art, quiet, love, peace. There are still people doing positive things in ordinary places every single day. There are still moments that remind us that we are alive for more than a reaction, more than our outrage, and more than just survival. I think part of that emotional maturity is learning how to tell the truth about both realities at the same time. Yes, the world is wounded. And yes, the world still has beauty. Yes, there is cruelty, but there is also compassion. And yes, there is grief, but there is still joy worth protecting. If we only make room for one side of that truth, we become distorted. If we only look at the darkness, we lose perspective. If we only look for comfort, we're losing honesty. We're denying reality. But if we can learn to hold both reality and hope, sorrow and beauty, grief and gratitude, then maybe we can become people who are not naive, but well rooted, not detached, but grounded, not hard and cynical, but resilient. And maybe that's why so many of us, maybe this is what we need right now. Not more noise and outrage, but a way of being human that allows us to stay awake without drowning in all the nonsense, to stay compassionate without collapsing, to continue to be informed without becoming consumed, to stay soft without becoming too fragile. So that's where we're going today. This is an episode about tending your inner life on purpose, about refusing to let the darkest parts of the world have final word over your mind, your body, your relationships, and what sense that has for you and what it means to be alive. The darkness is real, but it is not the only real thing to exist. And if we're going to live well, we have to remember that on purpose. We have to counter the negativity. Why does the world feel so heavy right now? I think part of the answer is that heaviness is no longer something we encounter only once in a while. It's something that we live in. There was a time when bad news arrived in moments. You heard about something tragic or unjust, and there was space around it. Time to process or talk to someone, time to grieve, time to recover before the next thing came along. But now there is no space. The world feels heavy because we are taking in more human suffering and outrage, more division and fear and uncertainty than most people were ever meant to absorb in one day. Before breakfast, we can scroll past war and political conflict, economic stress, natural disaster, violence, public scandal, moral outrage, somebody else's personal collapse. And then we are somehow supposed to put a smile on our face, answer our emails, go to work, make dinner, be emotionally present, and act like our nervous system has not been affected at all. But of course it has. How could it not? The world feels heavy because bad news is no longer occasional, it's ambient. It hums in the background of our lives like static, like background noise that we can't get away from. Even when we're not actively reading it, we know it's there. We know the next alert is coming, the next crisis or the next argument, the next story that will ask for our anger and our emotional attention. There is a psychological cost to living that way. It is exhausting to be constantly informed of everything that is broken and rarely given enough space to remember what is still intact. It is exhausting to see corruption and cruelty magnified all day long. It is exhausting to feel as though every corner of life is being narrated by urgency and outrage. I also think the world feels heavy because nothing stays local anymore. Years ago, much of what affected your inner life came from your actual life. It was your family or your town or your job, your friendships. It was all your immediate surroundings, your community. But now we live in a global proximity. We carry stories from everywhere. We witness tragedies far beyond our reach. We feel the pressure of problems that we can't solve or answer or even meaningfully touch. And that creates a deep sense of helplessness. It's not because we don't care, because we do. And caring without limits can become crushing. The world also feels heavy because so much of our public culture runs on intensity. Calm does not trend, peace does not trend, nuance does not spread nearly so fast as outrage. Fear gets clicks, conflict gets your attention, contempt gets rewarded. The loudest voices are often the harshest ones, and after a while, it begins to feel like harshness is the native language of modern life. And that does something to us. It makes us braced towards life. It makes us cynical and more reactive. We become more suspicious, less able to imagine a goodness without doubt or disbelief. And once that starts happening, the heaviness is no longer only outside of us, it's moving in. I think the world feels heavy because many of us are carrying private burdens at the same time we are carrying public ones. It's not just the news, which focuses on the negative. Listen to these and see if any of these resonate with you: bills, grief, illness, burnout, loneliness, parenting, caregiving, uncertainty about the future, relationship strain, the quiet pressure to keep functioning while all of that is happening. So, when the world adds its weight to our already full lives, it feels like too much because, quite honestly, it is too much. And maybe that is important to say plainly. Sometimes the world feels heavy because it is heavy. That does not mean that we're weak, and it doesn't mean that we're failing. It does not mean that we are too sensitive. I would like to propose that it may simply mean that we are human beings, and a human responds to an inhuman amount of noise and pressure. And yet, I think there is one more reason it feels so heavy. It feels heavy because we are rarely taught how to metabolize all that we are absorbing. We're told to stay informed and stay engaged, stay alert, stay productive, stay compassionate, stay available, and on and on and on. But very few people will teach us how to remain open to reality without becoming emotionally crushed underneath it. So we carry it everywhere. It permeates every aspect of our lives. In our bodies, it saturates our conversations. We carry it in our sleep. And what may scare me the most is in the way that we carry it, in the way that we imagine tomorrow. That is why making room for limits, for rest, for emotional recovery, that's why these things matter so much. Those practices are not signs of apathy. They can be healthy forms of self care that protect us from being overloaded and feeling nothing but resentment. So, why does the world feel so heavy? Because we are living in a time of constant exposure, because pain is being delivered to us at a relentless pace, and because outrage has become a business model, because many of us are already tired before the headlines even arrive, and because human beings were never meant to carry this much without tenderness, compassion, and hope. The question is not whether or not the heaviness is real. The question is, how do we stay human inside of it? So, we talked about why the world feels heavy. But now I want to talk to you about what that heaviness actually does to us if we do not find a way to counterbalance it. Because we often talk about taking in bad news as if it's just information. We think of our brains like filing cabinets. You read an upsetting headline, you file it away, and you go on with your day. But that's not how the human body works. We don't just file information away, we metabolize it. When you consume constant negativity, you are not just getting informed, you are biologically changing your baseline. Experts have actually studied this extensively, and the results are fairly sobering. What they found is that constant exposure to distressing news and outrage and pessimism actually rewires your brain. Here's what happens when we live without a counterweight. First, it locks your nervous system into a chronic stress response. When you read about a crisis or a conflict, your amygdala, the fear center, it reacts exactly as if you were in physical danger. Your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. It prepares you to fight, flight, or freeze. Now, historically, that response was meant to last only a few minutes, so you could run away from a predator, and then your body would return to a calm state. But then you're but when you're doom scrolling through negative news for hours every day, your body never gets that signal that it's okay to calm down. You stay in that constant low grade state of fight or flight. And that's what the media wants. They use this to keep you paying attention, to keep you clicking, to keep you reading their platform. Over time, that chronic stress leads to profound emotional exhaustion. It causes sleep disruption, muscle tension, headaches, brain fog. You are constantly tired because your body is working overtime to manage a threat that is happening, but it's happening through a screen. Now, secondly, negativity narrows our cognitive functioning. When you're flooded with anxiety and emotionally charged content, the brain actually diverts energy away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for logic, problem solving, and emotional regulation. This is why, when you're overwhelmed by the state of the world, you might find it incredibly difficult to focus on simple tasks at work. Why you suddenly have no patience for your kids. Constant negativity literally makes it harder for us to think clearly and calmly. Thirdly, it distorts our worldview and leads to a sense of helplessness. There is a psychological phenomenon that happens when we are oversaturated with bad news. We begin to experience a sense of learned helplessness. We see so much corruption or pain and division that we start to believe that everything is broken and nothing can be fixed. We lose our sense of agency and we start to believe that hope is simply naive. When this happens, negativity becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. When we believe the world is entirely hostile, we become more defensive. We become quicker to judge, less willing to trust, and more cynical about other people's motives. It actually damages our relationships because we carry that background agitation into our homes and take it out on the people that are closest to us. And finally, it creates an addiction to the very thing that is hurting us. This is perhaps the most insidious part. Why do we keep doom scrolling when we know it makes us feel terrible? Because the human brain is wired to pay attention to threats. And every time you swipe to a new terrifying headline, your brain gets a tiny hit of dopamine for finding new information. It creates a cycle where you feel anxious, so you check your phone to feel informed and safe, but information makes you feel more anxious, so you keep checking. It's a loop of distress. I share all of this not to add any heaviness to your life, but to validate what you might be feeling. If you have been feeling uncharacteristically anxious, or if things are feeling hopeless for you, if you have been feeling physically depleted, maybe you're struggling to sleep, or noticing that your patience is paper thin or perhaps even non existent, you aren't weak. What you're experiencing is natural, documentable. It's a biological effect of a nervous system that is absorbing too much negativity without any kind of a counterbalance. You cannot function well when your emotional diet consists entirely of outrage and grief. And that is why practices we are going to talk about next, the practices of setting boundaries and choosing beauty, creating space for joy, they're not frivolous, and they're not self indulgent. It's how you interrupt that negative cycle. It's how you tell your nervous system that it's okay, that it's safe just to sit down and take a breath. It's how we maintain and reclaim that humanity. When we talk about protecting our emotional health and setting boundaries with the news, one of the first questions people ask is, but don't I have a responsibility to know what's going on? Well, the answer is yes, absolutely. We have a responsibility to be awake in the world. We have a responsibility to know what is happening in our communities, in our countries, and to people who are suffering. Ignorance is not the goal. Apathy is not the goal. But there is a massive life altering difference between awareness and subjugation through immersion. Awareness is healthy. Immersion is destructive. Awareness says, I am going to check the news, understand what is happening, and decide what action I can take. Immersion says, I'm going to leave the 24-hour news cycle running through the background of my entire day, constantly checking for updates and reading every angry comment and letting every crisis dictate my mood from the moment I wake up till the moment I fall asleep. Awareness empowers you. Immersion paralyzes you. In 2007, I got rid of cable TV. In doing so, I realized that my life got much better because I would always watch the news and my stress level was always elevated. I really haven't missed it. I still hear everything I need to hear. All the news still somehow makes it to me, but I'm not constantly feeding that to myself. Here's a trap we fall into. When the world is in crisis, immersion feels like empathy. We convince ourselves that if other people are suffering, the only moral response is to suffer right alongside of them. We think that if we turn off the news or go take a walk or play with the kids, or if we stop to read a book, we're being selfish or privileged. We equate our level of distress with our level of compassion. That is a profound misunderstanding of how compassion actually works. True compassion requires energy, it requires presence, it requires a nervous system that is regulated enough to actually help someone else. If you are constantly immersed in negativity, you are not becoming more helpful to the world. You are becoming emotionally bankrupt. You are becoming a person who snaps at the grocery store clerk because you just read a terrifying headline in the checkout line. There is a concept in psychology called compassion fatigue. It happens when we are exposed to so much trauma and pain that our emotional circuits kind of short out. We stop feeling empathy because our bodies cannot handle the load anymore. So when you choose awareness over immersion, you are not choosing to stop caring. You're choosing to protect your capacity to care. What you are saying is, I care too much to let the news burn me out. So, what does that look like to practice awareness instead of immersion? Well, it starts with intentional boundaries. It means deciding when you consume information instead of letting information consume you. For example, if you know that reading the news right before bed spikes your anxiety and ruins your sleep, practicing awareness means you stop checking your phone at 8 p.m. You do not need to know the latest breaking crisis when you're trying to rest. The crisis will still be there in the morning, and you will be much better equipped to handle it if you've slept. Practicing awareness means deciding where you get your information. Choose one or two reliable sources. You read the facts and you close the app. Immersion is reading the facts and then scrolling through 300 furious comments from strangers arguing about facts and then reading four different opinion pieces designed to make you terrified about the facts. You do not need the outrage. You just need information. And finally, practicing awareness means giving yourself permission to step away from the flow. It is the realization that your constant vigilance is not holding the world together. The world does not need you to be panicked. The world needs you to be grounded. The news outlets want you to be panicked. So let me give you permission right now. You are allowed to put down your phone. You're allowed to protect your peace, and you are allowed to have a joyful, quiet, ordinary Sunday, even if the world is loud and chaotic, because joy is not a betrayal of the world's pain. It is a fuel that allows you to survive it, to maintain and keep your humanity. When we shift from immersion to awareness, we stop being victims of the news cycle. We reclaim our inner selves, our lives. But stopping the negativity is only half the battle. We want to truly stay human. So if we want to, we have to start actively putting something else back in. We have to counterbalance that negativity. So once we understand the difference between awareness and immersion, the next question becomes, should we actually do? How do we counterbalance the darkness without pretending that it's not there? How do we stay awake to reality without letting reality take over every room in our inner life? I think it starts here. We have to become more intentional about what we are feeding ourselves because no one would be surprised if a person felt physically sick after eating nothing but junk food for weeks. But emotionally, many of us are doing something very similar. We are consuming outrage and fear and all the negativity and stress all day long, and then wondering why we feel depleted and discouraged. Constant distress can keep the body and mind stuck in an activated state, which is part of why emotional recovery matters so much. So, counterbalancing the darkness means choosing on purpose to take in what restores you. Beauty. Try taking in the beauty of nature without comment or judgment. Silence. Try sitting quietly and just breathing. Music. Listen to music that moves you and makes you feel something good. Friendship. Try to lift a friend's day and make their day more positive. Humor. Try to find the humor in a situation without judgment. Art. My favorite is music and theater, but find some kind of art that lifts your soul. Nature. Try sitting quietly and observing nature away from the hustle and the chaos of your normal life. Go watch and listen to a babbling brook. Just sit there and let the sun hit your face. Try having an honest conversation with someone and try to understand what they're saying instead of arguing or disagreeing, even if you do. Just focus on understanding them, not correcting them. Just listen to understand and not to respond. Moments that remind you that life is still more than what is breaking. And I want to be clear about this. This is not escapism. This is nourishment. Escapism says I refuse to look at reality. But countering that negativity, creating that counterbalance says I refuse to let reality be reduced to its ugliest parts. That's a very different thing. Truth is, if all we look at is what's broken, eventually the brokenness starts to feel like the entire story. You stop noticing anything that is tender or decent. You stop seeing the quiet goodness that does not trend. You forget that somewhere, even right now, people are feeding each other, helping each other. Someone is creating something beautiful. Someone is showing mercy. Someone is creating art. Someone's making others laugh. Someone is bonding and connecting with their children. Some are comforting friends. Some are doing faithful little things that never, ever make headlines. But those things do matter. They don't cancel any suffering, they don't erase any injustices, but they keep the suffering and injustices from becoming the only lens through which we see the world. What we repeatedly pay attention to, what we focus on, and it's going to shape us in the way we think. So now, how do we counter the darkness in practical terms? Well, it can be small. It might be deciding not to begin your day with your phone. It's just waking up and allowing yourself 10 minutes before you let any noise in. Eat your breakfast. Enjoy it before you let any news in. Try stepping outside and looking at the sky and breathe in the fresh air before you look at any headlines or social media. Try listening to a piece of music that slows your breathing, kind of locks in that peace before you start your day. Try reading something that enlarges or enlivens your spirit instead of inflaming your nervous system. Try noticing one beautiful thing on purpose. Look for it, find it, it's there. I promise. Refuse to rush on past it. Just take a moment and appreciate it. Try calling a friend who makes you feel more human and not more drama. Try sitting at a table with people that you love and talking about something other than what's wrong with you or them or the world. I remember I used to like to throw people off, and I thought it was kind of funny in my head because people didn't know what to expect. I would say, "What's right with you?" instead of "What's wrong?" And it always would throw them because they just weren't accustomed to having anybody ask what's going well in their life. Try laughing with someone. Try sharing an uplifting story. Remember that intimacy or feeling connected to another person, is one of the most powerful counterweights to despair. Try creating something instead of reacting to things. Don't create drama. Write something, paint something, cook something, go out in your garden and grow something, scare people, sing something. Whatever makes you feel the joy of creation, make a mess with your hand. Make a mess that turns into some kind of meaning. Because creating, the act of creating, it pushes back against the lie that all we do is consume. And sometimes counterbalance is spiritual. It can be prayer or gratitude. It can be sitting in silence long enough to hear your own thoughts again, to hear your own heartbeat. It's returning to the truths that are deeper than the news cycle. It is remembering that your life is more than an incessant stream of alarms and reactions. I think that one of the most powerful, most important parts of this whole conversation is that counterbalancing negativity and chaos is not just about feeling better, it's about feeling whole. If we never replenish ourselves, we start living in fragments. We become reactive instead of reflective, hardened instead of wise. We become numb instead of compassionate. Boundaries and self care can help to interrupt that cycle before resentment and feeling overloaded take over your thoughts. And I do not think that is who most of us want to be. We don't want to become cynical people who cannot be surprised by goodness. We don't want to become chronologically outraged by people who have forgotten how to delight in something, anything. We do not want to become so tired and cynical that beauty can't reach us. So we need to put some weight on the scales of our lives, something positive to counterbalance the negative. And that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about counterbalance. It's returning. It's a return to what steadies you and to what softens you. It's a return to what reminds you that the world, though perhaps wounded, is not empty of wonder and goodness. And that return does not have to be dramatic. It can be 5 minutes of quiet. It can be a walk at sunset. It can be lighting a candle at the end of the day and just sitting there quietly. It can be reading a favorite poem. It can be allowing yourself to take the time to have a cup of tea without multitasking, a song that loosens something in your chest, or a child that's just laughing in the next room. You want to feel refreshed? Listen to a child laugh. That for me is amazing. Hearing that honest joy come from a child. A dog resting at your feet, or perhaps attached to your lap like he's some kind of barnacle. A conversation where no one is performing. These moments are not trivial. They're how we remember who we are and that it is okay to just sit there and breathe. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by the world, the invitation is not only to ask, what do I need to stop taking in? But maybe the invitation is to ask, what do I need to start doing again? What beauty have I neglected to notice? What friendships have I rushed past? What art or creation have I not made time for? What parts of my own soul have been starved by constant negativity and urgency? Because darkness is powerful, but it is not nourished only by evil. Sometimes it's nourished by our exhaustion, perhaps our inattention. Maybe it's our forgetfulness. And maybe by the way we stop making room for the things that keep us alive inside, that keep us human. So counter the darkness. It's real. But remember, the light, that's real too. And if you want to remain human in a world like this, you have to keep turning towards that light on purpose. So what does it look like in daily life? Let's get a let's get practical. Let's talk about small daily practices that help us restore ourselves before the world drains us dry. So, what does this look like on a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Sunday? When you're tired and all the headlines are loud and the email box is full and the world is feeling relentless, understanding counterbalance conceptually is one thing. Doing it when you're already emotionally drained is another. We do not need more grand philosophies about living well. We do not, or what we do need is practices that fit into ordinary days where we're usually feeling exhausted. So, let me give you a few simple daily practices to help you restore that balance. You don't have to do all of them. In fact, please don't try. Just pick a couple and let them become small rhythms in your daily life, indicating a return to balance. Try bookending your day with purposeful intention and not media information. This might be a very powerful change for you. The human brain is incredibly sensitive the first 30 minutes after waking up and the last 30 minutes before going to sleep. When you start your day by reaching for your phone, checking the news and reading messages, scrolling through somebody else's curated outrage, you are immediately handing the atmosphere of your morning over to the world. You're letting the crisis of the day set your emotional baseline before you even had a glass of water. Same is true at night. When you fall asleep reading about tragedy, you're asking your nervous system to rest while actively holding danger. So give yourself a boundary. Decide that the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes belong to you, not the news, not the noise. In the morning, replace the phone with something that feels good. Drink, drink your morning drink. Eat your breakfast slowly. Look out the window. Stretch. Read something that anchors you. Listen to a piece of music. Start your day as a person, not as an audience member. And at night, let your mind close on something safe. Wash your face, read a good book, talk to someone you love. Give your body the signal that for at least a few hours, it's okay to rest. When the world feels heavy, our attention naturally narrows to focus on what's wrong. It's a survival mechanism. But if we leave it there, we begin to feel that only wrong things exist. So you have to train your attention back towards what is good. Some people call this gratitude, but I like to think of it as beauty hunting. Make it a daily practice to find one genuinely beautiful thing. And I mean for you to intentionally look for it. Maybe it's the way the light hits the floor in your kitchen at 4 p.m. Maybe it's the exact shade of blue the sky turns just before sunset. Perhaps it's watching a child figure something out for the first time. Maybe it's the taste of a really good meal or feeling of getting into a car with a heater already running on a cold day. When you find it, don't just glance at it and move on. Pause, give it a few moments, let it register. Remind yourself that this is happening too. This is real. One reason the world feels so chaotic is because the speed of information is completely unnatural. Breaking news alerts, hot takes, instant reactions, 20-second videos, all the TikTok craziness, it all creates a false sense of perpetual urgency. Counterbalance that by consuming things that move at a human pace. Read a book instead of a thread. Listen to long form podcast or an entire album from start to finish. Watch a film that requires your attention rather than a feed that demands your reaction. Slower media forces your brain to slow down with it. It reminds you that not everything has to be processed in 15 seconds, and not every thought has to be a reaction. We are almost certainly receiving input. If we're not listening to a podcast, we're maybe reading an article. If we're not reading, the TV's on in the background. Silence is becoming ever more a rare commodity. So build a small window of silence into your day. Plan on it. Schedule time for it. Call it an input fast, but instead of fasting from food, you're fasting from noise, from chaos. Drive to the grocery store with the radio off. Take a 15-minute walk without your headphones. Just sit on the porch for 10 minutes with no screen in your hand. When you remove that constant stream of incoming voices, you finally leave room to hear your own. You give your own nervous system a moment where it does not have to process anything new. When you're feeling particularly helpless about the state of the world, one of the best ways to counter that feeling is to become the counterweight yourself. If the world feels cruel, be intentionally kind. If the world feels impatient, practice radical patience. If the world feels isolated, reach out to someone who is lonely. If you can't do something for the people suffering in a war torn country, Do something where you are to alleviate someone else's suffering that you can do something about. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. You can tip your server well. Tell a coworker that they did a good job. Text a friend just checking in. Bring your neighbor a popsicle. Something. When we feel despair, it's often because we feel powerless. But doing one small, tangible, good thing reminds you that you still have agency. You cannot fix the whole world, but you can change the emotional climate in the room that you're in. And that is not nothing. Is that a double negative? That's something. How's that? These practices will not solve the world's problems. They will not rewrite the headlines, and they will not make heavy things light, but they will make you stronger and they will keep you human. They will protect that part of your soul that needs to stay soft. It needs to stay soft while you navigate the world that is often very hard. Counterbalancing is not a one time event, it's a daily decision. It's a decision to say, I will not let the darkness have all the space. I choose to keep that room, my room, lit. Now, as we wrap up today, I want to say one final thing, especially to those of you who might be listening to this and feeling deeply tired. If you've been feeling the weight of your world in your chest, or if you've been struggling to find your footing, if you've ever wondered if it's even possible to stay soft or tender in a world that feels rough and jagged, well, I see you. I understand. And I want to remind you that your exhaustion is not proof that you are failing. It is proof that you are paying attention, that you have a heart that works. You cannot care deeply without feeling the cost of it sometimes, but you also cannot carry the whole world by yourself, and you're not meant to. The goal of this life is not to bear the unbearable without flinching. The goal is to figure out how to live inside of it while still remaining and maintaining your humanity. And remaining human means you are allowed to rest. You are allowed to have joy. You are allowed to turn off the news and step outside, look at the sky, decide that for the next hour, you're only responsible for admiring the beauty that's right in front of you. You do not honor the suffering of the world by letting it destroy your peace. You honor the suffering of the world by remaining a person who is whole enough, rested enough, and alive enough to help it heal. So this week, please be gentle with yourself. Put your phone down a little earlier. Protect your mornings. Notice what is still good in your world. Hold on to the people that make you laugh. And remember that while darkness is loud, it is not the only true thing. The light is here. Beauty is still here. You are still here. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, and for choosing to make this space a little easier for goodness today. If this episode has helped you, maybe help you breathe a little easier or find a new perspective, please share it with someone who might need to hear a little bit about how to counterweight their own world. I'm Lee Perry. I am the Pirate Therapist, and I have been very happy to have you here with me today. So please take care of yourselves, and I will catch you on the next episode. Now, go find some good in the world and go be the light in someone's life. You take care.